This he said not because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, had the money bag, and he used to take what was put in it. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always." Now a great many of the Jews knew that he was there, and they came, not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus. Let's talk about that. It's an interesting pericope. We are 6 days away from Passover. We are not long, and we cannot know exactly how much time there is between chapter 11 and chapter 12. There are some scholars who say days, and some who say weeks, but nobody thinks that it's very long. It had been just the last time that Jesus was there that he had raised Lazarus from the dead. It is a Friday night, and Jesus is at the house of Simon the leper. Now, his leprosy certainly is not active. Had it been active, nobody could have been around him. He could not have been around anybody. Leprosy was transmittable. And if he had been an active leper, then he would not have been given a dinner party. But he is one who had leprosy. And some believe that this is a man, a leper that Jesus had healed. Don't know about that. When there are blanks, you know what people like to do? Fill them in with their best guesstimate. And you just have to be very careful about that. People want to know who Simon the leper is, or was. And he's the one who gave the dinner party. It's about all I know. There are some who believe that he was the father of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. I don't know what we would have to substantiate that. That seems to be like, yeah, well, maybe he is. There are others, and this may come closer to being the truth, that he was the husband of Martha. And I would say that only on some very slim evidence that Martha was the one who was preparing the meal. She seemed to be the hostess. But we're not too surprised with that, are we? You remember that there had been some words between the sisters before. And Martha seemed to be the domesticated one. And Mary was more interested in taking care of Jesus' needs or being with him. So I really can't say for sure who Simon the leper was, other than this was his house. And he was in charge. He was the host for the dinner party. There was a good-sized crowd there, if you count them. There was a Simon. There was Jesus. There were the 12. And there was Mary and Martha and Lazarus. How many is that? Anybody count it? 17. So at least 17 guests at this dinner party. Why do you suppose they were having a dinner party? I would think so. I would think, Tim, that it was a celebration of what Jesus had done for Lazarus. Whatever relationship Lazarus had with Simon, we don't know. But the people were very happy. Mary and Martha certainly were excited that their brother was alive again. And so maybe this was just a celebration. Very often today when somebody's sick and they get well, you have a little party and you celebrate the fact that the person is doing better. So maybe it was just to honor Jesus and Lazarus as well. Mary takes a pound of very costly ointment, spikenard. It comes from a nard plant that is found in the Himalayas. And it had spikes out from it, and so it was called spikenard. It was very expensive. Now, one of the reasons that it would have been very expensive is that it came all the way from India, from the Himalayas. And so there would be some cost involved in getting it and getting it to Palestine and Mary having it. You wonder why she had it. To figure out how costly it was. Judas said, "Why was it not sold for 300 denarii?" Now, a denarius was worth about 17 cents and was a day's wages. So he's saying you could work a whole year, 300 days, and that's about how much this would have cost. I got out Mr. Google today or yesterday, and I looked at that. And do you know that Tennessee has no official minimum wage? That they accept the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25. Tennessee's behind on some of that, aren't they? Because people are paid a whole lot more than that, and some states have mandated a whole lot more than that. But if you figure that up, that's something like $17,000. Now, I don't know what you guys got and your boyfriends got your girlfriends and your wives for Valentine's Day. I went with a dozen yellow roses and some chocolate-covered strawberries because that's kind of Sierra's thing. I never dreamed of paying $17,000 to buy that girl some ointment. That wasn't anywhere on my list. So why did she have it? And we don't know for sure. Some think that it may have been a dowry. And that makes good sense. That maybe it was a part of a dowry that was expected to be used when she married. But at any rate, she had it. And she broke it. It would have been in a container. And she put that on Jesus. She anointed him. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, I think, that she did this. She anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. Now, for many, that would have been considered just out of place. A proper woman does not do that. But why might she have anointed his feet? Why not his head?
Well, in Matthew and Mark, that's what the woman did.
In Matthew and Mark, that's right.
Can I ask you, are you saying it's Simon's house because of Matthew and Mark? Because it doesn't
No,
say it in
I wasn't saying that at all. That the one in Luke is Simon the Pharisee. This is Simon the leper. This is clearly a different Simon. I'm saying that the difference, why there might be two, is one was done 6 days before the Passover and one was done 2 days before the Passover. Even we've got a matter with chronology there and how it was counted, or we have two anointed.
John doesn't say Simon, right?
No.
Yes. Yes, I would take so. And so the reason that some people believe there were two is that 6 days before Passover or 2 days before Passover. And there clearly is a difference there. Now, was the chronology wrong? Were they counting differently? Maybe. I don't know. But what I just ran into a lot of evidence that surprised me about this 3 anointings. At least there were 2, and perhaps there were 3. And it's interesting that the one in Luke was at Simon the Pharisee, and this was at Simon the leper. So we have Simon, Simon, which confuses some people.
Simon the Pharisee didn't offer him anything like that.
No, they didn't. The feet.
I'm confused with her too, but where is it in John that it says it's Simon? It doesn't.
It doesn't
Only in
in
Matthew and Mark.
The thing that I think we need to remember is they were eating like at an Oriental meal. This picture of the Last Supper, that's just crazy. It's off the wall. They did not all sit behind a table and pose for a picture till it was painted. They reclined around a very low table, a coffee table height maybe, and they reclined on their elbow, their hand and their elbow on the ground or on pillows, and their feet would be back this way, and then there would be somebody who would be up in next to them. So what part of Jesus would be accessible? His feet. Yeah. His feet would be out and be accessible. That may be why it says here that she anointed his feet and that she wiped his feet with her hair. Now, for some of the ladies today, that would be a little hard. Don't have quite enough hair to do that. But some might have enough hair to pull that off. And there's a line here that has always intrigued me. And it's the last line in verse 3. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. What does that tell you?
It's like incense. They're likening it to incense.
Okay.
There was a strong aroma.
Strong aroma.
A large amount. Pretty big amount for it to be able to smell.
Yeah.
They estimate it was not a 16 ounce like we would think. In a pound, it's about 12 ounces.
Yeah.
And of course, spikenard is very expensive because it's usually like the king's, because it's mentioned that it's salt.
Yes, it is.
And I think that what it was, why they spent money on it, they made a big deal of it. And something that fragrant really had to decay. And I think that since Lazarus didn't need it as much, and maybe that was intended for him at one time, and Mary said that the Lord needs it.
Well, in verse 7, it says, let her alone against the day of...
I hear a voice.
Yeah.
That's me.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
It says in verse 7, it says, then Jesus said, let her alone
Mm-hmm.
against the day of my burying.
Yeah.
She kept it.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, they didn't have time to really prepare him because the women came with the spices.
Yeah.
And stuff.
And what everybody said is right. Wasn't what I was thinking about. Who wrote this? John. Who was there? John. Who would have known that the aroma filled the house? John is the one who gives little things like that. John is the writer of the minutia. He gives you the little details that nobody else gives you. And I can just imagine, maybe I've got an overactive imagination, but I can just imagine John saying, and the aroma filled the house where we were sitting. It would have brought back a memory to him of what happened there. He's writing it sometime later, and he remembers exactly what went on. Well, Judas, and we're not surprised, is the one who said, why was it not sold for 300 denarii? That's a guess, his estimate, and given to the poor. And it's not that he cared for the poor, but he was the treasurer. He kept the money back.
We
And he used to take what was put in it. It's not uncommon today for people who handle funds sometimes to dip into the funds. We read every once in a while about some elected official who is taking money out of wherever they have money stored for their office.
Administrators and secretaries have done it in the past around here.
Yeah.
The story of one up in Morristown got over $100,000.
Absolutely. It happens. And Judas carried the money, and so he would reach in there and get some for his own purposes. We don't know what he did with it. That's not told us. But, you know, a year's wages? To put that in the money bag and you're the treasurer? Now, you talk about jingle, jingle, jangle. I mean, that make you pretty happy as the treasurer. And he didn't care for the poor. But it would have been money for him to use. Judas seemed to be the man who cared about money. You know, he bargained for the price for Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. So he just seemed to be the guy who wanted the money and was more concerned about that than anything. And Jesus had let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. Now, did she know that? I don't believe she knew that at all. But Jesus recognized it as an anointing for his burial. He knew he was going to die. And what did they do with the body when it died in this time? They anointed it with spices or something that made it smell good. I mentioned last Sunday or last Wednesday, they didn't embalm bodies. They simply buried them the same day. They wrapped them up in linen cloth and wrapped spices and ointments and things like that up in it to hold the stench down. Jesus said, leave the woman alone. She doesn't understand all this. But I'm seeing this as something that was done for my burial. He recognized that as a special deed. And he says something in 8 that people have sometimes misunderstood. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always. Did Jesus have a thing against poor people? I mean, he constantly was taking care of poor people, helping poor people, raising the son of a poor widow. You know, he was constantly doing something for poor people. So it's not that he had a thing against poor people. He just says, you're going to have poor people forever. Is that a true statement? Which meant what about their funds? They would have many opportunities to take care of poor people. But they would not have another opportunity for him. That's all he's saying. Not that there was any problem with poor people, but that he recognized that they would always have opportunities for the poor.
Oh,
Yes.
so why in Mark does it talk about dumping it on his head?
Does it talk about what?
Dump the oil on his head.
Yeah.
Matthew, Mark, say head. This was his feet.
Yeah. And that's what makes me think there may have been 3 anointings. That's one of the things. There are some similarities, but there are enough differences to make me scratch my head and wonder, were there perhaps 3 anointings? The other explanation, the one I grew up hearing, that I don't feel as comfortable with anymore, is that sometimes an author will give you information, somebody else will give you more information, and somebody else will give you more information, and it's when you put it all together that you get the story. It's like if I say there was a 2-car pileup out in front of the building. That's all you know. If I tell you that one was a Chevrolet and one was a Ford, you have more information. If I tell you one was a black car and one was a white car, then you have more information. If I tell you they had to come with the jaws of life and get somebody out of one of those, you have more information. And it's not contradictory, it's complementary. And so the people who believe there are only two, Michael, say that Matthew just gives information that John doesn't. But I don't know if I feel as comfortable with that as I used to.
The way John describes everything in more detail, he would have said head and feet.
Yes. Yes. So, and wonderful capstone miracle of raising a man who was so dead that his body had already begun to decay. And it was like that was just like rubbing salt in the wound. It was like, there is that Lazarus. I wish he would just stay dead. But it didn't. And so they were saying, we'll kill him. We'll make him dead. And perhaps he will not be raised a second time. And because of that, many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus. They said, I see some reason here to believe in Jesus. Remember what the theme of John is from chapter 20. Many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written that you might believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through his name. Why did John say he wrote it? It's called the Gospel of Belief. And it is to cause people to believe in Jesus. And he chose certain signs and wonders. Jesus did so many more, but there are only 7 mentioned in John. But there are so many more that would cause a thoughtful person to say, here's somebody. It's no ordinary fellow. Now, I want to close tonight by giving 2 or 3 lessons. I'll ask you, what do you think about this deed that Mary did that kind of sticks in your mind and challenges you?
I think because Jesus had raised her brother, and she was so ecstatic about that she wanted to do something for him.
It was a thankful deed. Okay?
Not knowing that it played into God's plan. And Jesus
No,
was plan.
no. She did not know that she was playing a part in God's plan. No, she did not.
It honored him.
Yes.
It honored him.
Exactly.
It did honor him. It pointed out the love that she had for Jesus. One of the things that I think that just really strikes me is what a loving deed it was. Now, you've got to love somebody to do that. I mean, there are people who make sacrifices for others and people who give gifts to other people, and that's wonderful. But just to take probably all that she possessed, I'm guessing, and break that on the feet of Jesus, does that not say something? I think that the deeds that we do ought to be loving deeds. That's why when we pass the plate on Sunday, and we don't have any other way to raise money for the church, we don't have any kind of sales or anything like that. We just give on the Lord's Day, and people who can't be here on that give at other times as well. But it's just like, do you love the Lord? And when you put that check in there, are you saying, Lord, I'm doing this because I love you? Or are you doing this because I got to give something and here's what I have left over? Or is it a real love offering. I wonder about that. I wonder about that myself. One of the things that I do, I've started doing some crazy things in my old age, but on Sundays I look at my check. And Sierra writes them because if I wrote them, it would be worse than Rusty's signature on his checks. And you'd have to see one of those to understand the truthfulness of what I'm saying. But she writes them, and I hold it in my hand, and I think, Lord, I love you. It was a loving deed. Anything else about that deed that just...
I think that what it is a show that she knows this is the Son of God. And it was a sacrifice that she did everything to God.
Yes.
Because God, they'd been waiting all their life and beyond for the Messiah.
For the Messiah.
He's right there at the house.
Yes.
It's like God is into my house or something. And you wanted to do something special for him because when he raised Lazarus, he showed beyond his who he was. And that's why a lot of people walked away wanting that because they said, that is the Messiah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is the Son of God.
Let me give you a couple other things to think about. First of all, yes, I'm sorry.
Didn't she like caring for him? Because them walking and stuff, his feet aren't. They're not going to be like the perfect specimen or anything. But she's caring for him and wanting him to feel better and
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it was a brave deed. Don't you think there was bravery associated with it? How many women are going to get up and pour this spikenard on a fellow's feet and then wipe them with the hairs of her head? I think sometimes the things that we do have to be done bravely. I think it takes some bravery to be a Christian. I think a lot of people aren't brave enough. As we play things close to the vest, what will they think? Whatever they want to. Well, they might not like it. They might not. I think we just have to say, I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to be brave enough to do it. And I admire her bravery. I really do. And I admire her extravagance. You can't do that. You can't give that much. Really? Who am I to say? Sometimes you just have to be extravagant. What's that?
You gotta have faith.
Yes, and you do have to have faith. Absolutely. I just think it's just a marvelous, marvelous story. And there's so much wrapped up in what this woman did. And we could debate how many anointings there were and why they're different and that kind of thing. But from this one, there's stuff in there is worth remembering, okay? Now, next week, I won't be here. Are you teaching next week or John's teaching next week? John's teaching next week. He volunteered. Was voluntold, I think. He volunteered. But it'll be the triumphal entry, which is a great story. Okay? Thanks so much, folks. I appreciate it so very much. I assure you. Don't pull that off.